Ever-changing geopolitical balance means or calls for a new architecture for global governance, a new way to ensure effective cooperation. Who better than to reflect on what I've just said than Rufus Yerka, who's Deputy Director General, World Trade Organization. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm going to use an analogy that you shared with me a few minutes ago. Things are changing so rapidly that it's almost like being on the back of a tiger and really don't even have the bandwidth to get off and take stock for fear of being consumed. In these changing times, rapidly changing times, when you call for a new global governance architecture, what do you mean?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that is the feeling that people around the world have about globalization and about the rapidly changing economic circumstances in the world. It brings many, many good things, and it brings many benefits to countries. It's lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, but it brings with it a whole set of new problems and challenges and, frankly, fears and concerns people have. And it seems to me that what that means is unless there's some confidence given to publics by governments around the world that they understand these concerns and they're ready to adapt to them by changing what you referred to as the architecture of global governance. That doesn't mean we throw out all the old institutions and start over again. A lot of these have served the world pretty well. They need to be adapted, they need to be transformed. We're trying to do that, for example, in the WTO. We've had a great struggle, as you know, with the Doha round.
Indeed.
That's an attempt to make the WTO more relevant, and particularly to emerging economies, to the developing world, to address some of the deficiencies in the WTO system with respect to developing countries. But it's only one example. And of course, the G20 is another good example of an effort by leaders to find a way of more collective responsibility for managing this changing world. There is no longer a sort of a bipolar Cold War order which sort of put everybody into camps and where people accepted US leadership. That doesn't exist anymore. But the question is, what's it being replaced by? And it to me has to be replaced by a stable relationship among key governments to promote economic growth, democratic values, and liberal economic order.
You know, one has picked up on very differing points of view here at the GrowthNet, and perhaps I'm overstating the point, but on the one hand you have people really championing the cause of regional trade agreements and negotiations and almost saying, well, the WTO, it's there, but how much value does it really bring to our economies? How would you answer those skeptics?
I would answer them by saying nothing is ever simple or lacking in complexity when it comes to dealing with these kinds of economic issues. And the reality is we have a world with many regional arrangements. We also have a world with a multilateral system. They have to coexist. We're not going to move to a purely multilateral world, and we're not going to move to a purely regional world of trading blocks. We're going to find some mix, some balance between all of those different initiatives. I negotiated the NAFTA agreement in the United States, and I know that the pressures for regional integration were very strong. They're strong here in Asia. Europe obviously formed the European Union out of that regionalism. But those things can coexist with multilateral cooperation as well. And for people who question the WTO, if I could just defend my own institution a bit, the WTO, of course, is an agreement among governments. It's run by the governments. It's not run by any group of international bureaucrats. But it is a place where the governments of the world see some value in creating what I would call the rule of law in international economics. Non-discrimination, transparency, principles of treating all countries alike. And there are many rules in the WTO system today that are working very effectively in helping to supplement what the liberalism that is coming through regional arrangements.
You know, I think one point was really a very simple one. It just is easier to conduct the regional agreements. There is a familiarity, there is a sense of sort of being on the same page, which is missing in, say, the Doha round, which is why the Doha round is where it is. But really, that aside, you know, as you observe these new groupings that are taking place, do you worry about, you know, the fact that not enough attention is being paid to the Doha round?
I worry, obviously, about whether countries are prepared to reach across regions and find global solutions to some very difficult issues in the trading system. And that's part of what the Doha round is about. Take, for example, agricultural subsidies. That was one of the things we were trying to deal with in the Doha round. Tremendous potential benefits to agricultural producing countries, to those with a comparative advantage in agriculture, if we could do that on a global scale. Very few of these regional arrangements really address that problem. So yes, I think that we have to recognize that we won't be able to do everything just by regionalism, and we need to avoid the temptation. Look at India today. Where are your growing markets around the world? More and more they're going to be, you're going to have tremendous growth within the region, but you're also going to have trade and investment opportunities around the world that Indian businesses, Indian producers, Indian innovators are going to want to take advantage of. And they can only do that if they have something that goes beyond their own region.
I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this question, but you know, where do you see actually the Doha round going this year?
Well, this year, it's clear we're not going to succeed with the entire agenda. The effort now, we have this Bali ministerial coming up at the end of this year. It's an important milestone. It's not the end of the road. By the way, the road never ends in multilateral negotiations,
I'm sure,
nor in regionalism either. So we have to keep that in mind. We've had a lot of frustrations with the Doha round. But you know, in grand historical terms, it wasn't so long ago that the GATT system evolved into the WTO in the Uruguay round and created a huge new set of rules that are still being absorbed. That was 1995. It seems like ages ago, but it's really relatively recent. And meanwhile, the WTO has been strengthening. China only became a member in 2001. Russia just became a member this year. The dispute settlement system has expanded interpretations of the rules in such a way that it's actually strengthening and tightening the disciplines of the system. So yes, I'm worried about the WTO. The Doha round isn't going to finish this year. I think what we will achieve by Bali is a smaller package of improvements in certain areas that will give confidence to countries to go forward with continuing the Doha negotiations.
You're quietly optimistic. Thank you.
I'm always optimistic.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.